content, because there's no way in order to like define the content that you want your children to watch in a way that you can do it mechanistically, right? You can set app blocks, again, this exists on both sides of the house, to block out the worst kind of content, but once you're allowing YouTube, what kind of content that your child is watching inside YouTube, once you're allowing Instagram, what they're watching inside Instagram, all of these kinds of things are simply, you don't have the ability to do it. You can go much more extreme and say, we are just blocking Instagram, we are just blocking YouTube. We think this is much more extreme measure, and you're also blocking out a lot of important content, and I'll get into it more when I come to backlash, but we think this is not a realistic thing that most parents would be able to do, or most children would comply with. So we think that within the realistic mechanistic tools that we have, it's simply just much more easier to enforce the fact that you're limiting the amount of screen time that you have. But on the second count, it's also easier to monitor when you have like a set amount of limit in terms of what the screen time should be. It's much easier to monitor that, right? You can just say that you can just watch like how much amount of time your child is spending on the phone, and you can easily monitor this. Whereas in order to monitor what kind of content that they're watching, you would have to get into much more granularity. You would have to constantly monitor as to what they're watching. You would have to ask them. You would have to spy on them. All of these kinds of things, right? So which means that simply because there are more steps involved, and there's likely going to be much more resistance from the children when you're trying to spy on them, or when you're trying to get into all of the details of what they're doing on their phone. This is simply a reduced capacity, even if you don't buy that backlash is important, right? So in terms of just the number of steps involved and the granularity involved, it's just much easier to do this when you're like limiting like something which is a coarse measure rather than a fine-grained measure. And thirdly, it's also easier to, it's also not easy on their side of the house to find like good content, or define good content, or what you think is good content, and recommend it, and like constantly shift it, etc. So it's very like, even in terms of forgetting about the tools, even at the level of definition or concept, it's much harder to define what you actually want to do, and you would have to put in much more amount of effort in order to do so, meaning that for a given amount of effort that most parents have, like a fixed amount of effort they can spend on this, they have a much higher capacity to do it well when they're doing it in terms of, again, this coarse measure of just limiting the amount of screen time compared to trying to limit the content that they're watching, right? So basically, it's just simply much more easier to enforce, and the enforcement is important because, first of all, you don't get the impacts if you don't have the enforcement, but secondly, in terms of the, to the extent that the enforcement is successful, this builds up like Retter, it builds up like a mindset in the children that no, this is like a reasonable thing that we are complying, and because of the fact that we are complying with it, it's something that we are valuing, right? If you're trying to, like you have a rule but you cannot enforce it, then nobody takes it seriously, and it's much more easier to violate that rule to a much higher extent because there's no gravity which is associated with the rule. There's also why like enforcement is important beyond just the impacts of the direct impact of the enforcement, just how seriously the rules are taken, and in a larger scheme, how much impacts you are trying to, you are able to get, right? But secondly, in terms of the backlash from the children, right? So the rare reasons like the backlash would be much worse from the children on their side of the house compared to ours. So first of all, notice that we are going to do this from an early age, right? Meaning that we are already going to limit the amount of screen time that they're getting, and there will be some limits, there will be some function of how much screen time they're allowed to get when they grow older, etc., etc. But there's already baked in, right? Whereas on their side of the house, it's always going to be a new negotiation, because as the children grow, they want to watch different kinds of content, and the parents would necessarily have to like renegotiate this deal every time, because they have new kinds of friends, there are new things happening in the world, there are new kinds of trends, etc., etc. So they always have to renegotiate, which means that it always feels like a new battle in the mind of the children, and they're much more likely to backlash because there are much more avenues at which they can backlash. Whereas on our side of the house, because this is something that is set and is not changing in any categorical sense, the children are much more likely to be compliant with it and not backlash. Before I go on, is there any POI closing? Okay, great. So moving on to the second point, the second reason as to why the children are much more likely to backlash is because the enforcement of the content necessarily implies an enforcement mechanism which implies that the parents are not trusting children, and that's how the children are going to proceed, right? Because the parents are constantly trying to monitor what they're watching. They're not, the children thinks, or they're always recommending that this is the thing that you should watch, and there's not something you should watch, meaning that as the children are going to necessarily think that the parents are not trusting me with the decisions that I make. They're constantly criticizing me, right? Because they'll always overstep to a certain extent, and then the parents will tell them off, this is not something that you should be watching, this goes against the rules, etc., etc. So this rule is always associated with the decision or the judgment of the children or the taste of the children, meaning that they are much more likely to despise the rule itself, whereas even if we tell them off on our side of the house, it's not associated with the rule because the rule is not about the content, and therefore they are much less likely to backlash against the rule itself. But thirdly, in terms of the regulations that the different parents are enforcing, right? Different parents are going to have different tastes and different boundaries, etc., etc. Meaning when the children compare what they're allowed to watch and what they're not allowed to watch, they're much more likely to rebel against their parents, saying that, this kid's parents are allowing them to watch, but not me. Whereas when it's a much more coerced measure in terms of the hours, etc., it doesn't feel categorical. It feels like a scalar differentiation, like, okay, they're allowing half an hour more, so they're, again, much less likely to rebel. And baggage is important for relation, but also for enforcement. For all these reasons, please propose.
Okay, thank you, Prime Minister. And to open.
OG's case about backlash rests entirely on their characterization of what the different oversight is going to look like. We don't agree with that, and we're going to characterize this differently. 3 cases from OO. 1, about why the increased time you spend online is critical for your relationships and is actually useful time and good. Second of all, why when you're overviewing the content, you're able to have better content regulation where the parent is more involved in what the child is consuming. And Amitai will discuss parent-child relationships and why those then improve. Let's go into what do we think this looks like. We think that A, this literally is just overview and safeguards. I put in words from a young age of I'm not allowed to write sex on the internet and it won't pop up for the child. Second of all, we think that oftentimes this means that I'm watching things with them. So it means that when they're spending time at their computer, I'll sit and work next to them so I see which games they're watching. But we think that this also means that I'm enforcing specific types of content, whether this is educational content like Khan Academy, like the Green Brothers, who have a huge podcast about scientific information. But third of all, we think that this is things like going over the breakdown of their app consumption and what they're watching, going over the history. We don't think it is so extreme for a parent occasionally to be looking at this type of breakdown, to be watching things with their child, and having these safeguards. Like this is basic things, which is to some degree comparative to taking their phone away or putting on screen time. Notice that if I'm literally taking their phone away and blocking all access to them, to some degree that's even more extreme and creates more backlash. But let's now go into the cases. Let's discuss why do we think that the increased time online is critical for the child's relationships in the modern era. Why do we think that the amount of time which I'm spending online with other people is so critical for there to be more time rather than a limited amount of time which my parent controls? Beforehand, I quickly want to frame it. Oftentimes, what people are doing online is different social behaviors. We think that this means games, which are interactive with other people and I'm playing online. Whether this is WhatsApp, where I'm texting with friends and having conversations over different things that I'm doing or sending funny comments. This is things like the content which I'm watching, which often I discuss with other people, or sending reels. A lot of our engagement online is very social inherently. Why do I need this extra time? 1, we think that it's just being there constantly. Whether this is when the other person in times of need writes to me going, I really need your response now, and it's the fact that they know that they can reliably get a response from me in a specific amount of time. But oftentimes this is also just spontaneity. We don't know when my friend is going to respond. If I have my phone away, if I'm literally not able to open WhatsApp, then I'm incapable of responding. If my friend is having a bad time and I want to respond, if they have a funny comment and it takes them a day later to respond in which my response is not going to be relevant, we think that the time period is critical for me being able to be a good friend and build up a relationship. Second of all, we think that there's almost a build-up of the relationship over time. There's almost a FOMO if I'm not there. Whether that is missing inside jokes, which people continue referencing to, but I wasn't there in the first place when we killed that character in the game. Whether that's things like what if of me wondering with myself what people are talking about, and I have a sort of almost sense of FOMO of it, where comparatively when I'm able to be there for those moments, that's far more critical and able to build a relationship. Third of all, we think there's just something about repeated time and commitment within it. It's just the fact that I'm showing up, that people get used to seeing my face. When someone stops showing up, they stop becoming a part of the scene, and we stop remembering to invite them, for them to be there, just because they're less associated with the game, with the social interaction in the first place. But fourth of all, we think that there's just an issue of oftentimes when my screen time is limited, I'm going to prefer to spend some of that time in my own solitary world, whether that's watching Netflix or having my own personal content, which means that I'm not spending the time doing this sort of social things. So what we're trying to say here is that the amount of time I spend online is critical for my ability to create the relationships. Why do we think that there's something unique about the online relationships which we're not able to get in the physical real world? One, the energy in which I'm spending. After long days of school, when I don't feel like being totally having the energy to notice all the different things, to having to go out of the house to see different people, we think that when online, it requires less energy in terms of how much it's exerting for me in the first place. I get to be in my comfort zone. I don't have to run outside and to be outside. So we think that that allows me to have more social content, which I wouldn't be able to otherwise because I just wouldn't want to exert the time. Second of all, we think the exposure to different people, whether the fact that I have more diversity, whether geographically, just different types, which then means I'm able to have people who have different types of interests who are more similar to me, or which I wouldn't be able to if I was just limited to my geographic area. Overall, why do we think this is good? We think that this is just fun moments, important for people, but second of all, it's a sort of sense feeling that I'm not alone, that I have people who understand me, especially when there are changes within my own geographical environment. When I'm moving schools, I know that I have people who can always be there for me, and I can keep on remaining relationships long term. So we think that's on relationships. Let's go into content moderation in the first place, and why parents are able to oversight the information, whereas otherwise they won't be able to beforehand. Closing?
Emotion is not about conscripting your child to the Amish church. It's about reducing time. The mind-numbing hours are when you're scrolling passively, you still have enough time for messages.
Yeah, but when you're limiting your child's time, giving them 1 hour, that means that when your friend is at 9 p.m. is having a panic attack, you're not going to be there. You're not going to be there for the jokes. You're not going to be there for the bonding of the games. Why is content moderation capable of happening? We think that when I am forcing my child to be offline for some of the time, I need to then spend that offline time with them. So the way I perceive my time that I'm committing to my child, it is going to be in the time where they're not offline. Whereas comparatively, when I know that they're spending a lot of time online, I'm going to want to dedicate that time. Part of the time I'm going to spend with them is going to be that online time. When they're playing that video game, I'll sit in the salon, the living room, and watch and see the TV show they're watching, because that is how I perceive the amount of time that I'm spending with them. But second of all, I feel like it's more important when they spend more time online, because that is something that I feel is critical within their life, because it's something that they dedicate a lot of time to, which just means that I want to spend the time watching things with them, and that I want to understand the world in which they access, whereas otherwise I would try and access different things within their life. Why is this good? We think that, first of all, there is generally bad content online, whether this is violence in video games, whether this is like porn and stuff, whether this is offhand racist comments that your friends make online in video games, or whether there are people who online in...
Thank you, Leader of Opposition, and to continue government cycle. Let's go Shachar.
Ready? Yes. Starting in 3, 2, 1. Panel, we are in this debate in different ways. First, we are showing we simply have better capacity to do it in house than the house. Even for the comment say, and yes, this is like fiat motion, both sides have so much measure of fiat, but we are showing you why we have more capacity to do it well on outside of the house. In the outside of the house, you are much more limited in order to do it well, which means that the capacity to gain the benefits that they are talking about, like me spending time with my parents and doing things well, and or making sure that which content is being regulated, etc., is much more limited. So, and that's actually beginning on like second, we are also showing you a greater backlash that again wasn't properly engaged at all. We are going to engage it in a way beforehand, because I'm like already going to do it on something battle. So I'm going to engage it properly. And also we are going to show direct damages that comes from spending too much time on the apps, which are going to weigh compared to the certain benefits that you are getting from opening position. So let's start with direct rebuttals what we get from opening position. First, they come and try to paint you a very nice world. They say, look, we are going to just spend time with the children and see them time and feed them with the content and make it very nice and well, and everyone will be funny and everyone will love it. We don't think it's the light manifestation, like in terms of like how the child will experience it. Because we are telling you that they are considering the parent will come and watch it when you are playing with your friends, and your friends might come and swear, or your friends, you will themselves will swear, or they use like some like a new modern trend and all of the stuff. You as a parent will say, why they are talking this way? I don't like your friends. Why are you spending so much time with them? Why you don't spend with with the child next door more time? Why you spending with this other child? Because I'm friend with this parent, I'm not friend with this parent. It means you're going to feel you're always overing them. And even if they are not commenting all the time, think, you're a child, 12-year-old or like 10-year-old, you're playing again, and your parent always like looming like this and watching the screen and making sure what happens there. You're going to feel comfortable? No! You're going to feel that someone actively watches you all the time. And they can say, once in a while I'm watching and looking, because if once in a while I'm watching and looking, most of the time the child will spend unregulated and see a lot of content that is bad in their criteria. And as such, they need to consider much more regulation in this, and other don't have their impacts. Also, they come and say, no, I just like decided back to fake stuff. Most parents have different interests. It's already brought you by our claims. It means that parents have different morals on what they want to expose or not. It means that each parent is going to relate differently, which means that yes, some parents don't want you to talk with a guy which is like disabled because they think autism is infectious, because some parents are stupid. What can I do? So they're going to try and regulate which friends they are looking for. Or they're going to hear about a new trend, and there's a moral panic about this new trend about clowns being dressed in a scary way. Why are you following those videos with the clowns? I want to dress as a clown and scare people in the night. I want to reduce it. Or I'm afraid of those stuff, so I'm going to reduce it as well. I view gays as immoral, so I'm going to limit it as well. They need to consider that I don't have like better exploration for online communities because my parents actively explore it with me and decide for me which online community I should be in. So if anything, we have more freedom to explore those online communities, and as such you are winning them on the same clash because we have the capacity to find those communities that actually benefit for you. And as such, if you even think there's a lot of issues in the side of the house. Now, on the online time being good, first, again, you can see your friends physically. You don't need, like, again, generations beforehand, we didn't have the phone 24/7, and we had enough trust and enough friendship, enough everything. We didn't need to be 24/7 on the watch. You still go to school, you still have some time as well as eating on the WhatsApp, on the social media, you still meet and discuss them. The extent is very unclear because people were fine in terms of social connections 2 generations ago. Why they were so bad, I don't know. And this is a global perspective motion that we have fiat, it means that all parents are doing it on our side of the house, and they need to concede to it, and basically need to concede that all parents are going to limit it, and therefore there's no FOMO, there's no fear that someone else is going to do it, and I'm not. So this typically takes a lot of their claims outside of it. And also, if it's so important, the online relationship, you're going to start it as a teen, not as a child, and you think that this is it's very important for you, for your development, both mentally and personality, and things like that. POIs. 3, 2, 1. I tried. So if you want a relationship, it's better to do it as a hey, you already explore yourself and understand yourself and find to do better when you are mentally prepared and develop your identity properly. Now, let's talk about the meditation, what exactly is important and how we are winning it. Because in our side of the house, we have constant, clear rules. Parents are only going to follow the guidelines they're getting for how many hours, when to do it. They're going to make sure that when you are about to sleep, this is when you limit this time. You're not going to make sure that when you are in school, they're going to shut down, like remotely, their connections to the apps and things like that. This is when things are happening, they're going to do it consecutively under the same parameters in the very clear guidelines that are easy for children to understand.
If parents are smart in the way that they have screen time guidelines, won't they be thoughtful in the way they create
because morals differ between different parents and they prioritize different things to block and have different regulations. This is much more arbitrary whatever all the parents come and claim and limit the screen time in the same way across the world. They don't have the capacity to claim which way parents regulate and what they are blocking, because parents have different measures to what they want to regulate and they need to engage with it. Then this is exactly what they are telling you, because in answer to doubts, all the children are clear what they have and why it's good or not. Like yes, we are all making sure that at 8 o'clock we stop having our phones and we stop talking with one another. In the answer to doubt, I constantly ask, why my friends have more, are able able to play this game and I can't? Why they are able to access this social media and I can't? Why they are able to talk with those children and I can't? Why they are able to go to talk about gay morals and most stuff and I can't? This is why you have much more conflict, because the lines are much more blurred, because you don't have an objective criteria to how to regulate it properly. And as such you have much more difference in morals, which means there's much more conflict between you and your parents, because you always envy what other children have, and you don't, and you can't play this game because your parents say it's too mature for you, or too sexual, or all of those stuff. This is why they simply have more conflict on their side of the house, which means that there's much less trust in their side of the house. And trust is simply logically prior to all the damage that we are talking about. Because trust decides whether or not, when I'm seeing something disturbing online, whether or not to come to talking to my parent or not. Especially when I become a teen, when I start to see very disturbing stuff. Or when there's something bad for me, or which friends I have, whether or not to go to talk with my parents or not. And I want to do so when I trust them, and I don't think that they survive me 24/7 and put me under pressure and try to basically control me, and I want more freedom and don't give it to me. This is why you think that this amount of also I have like spending too much time online also fucks your brain as a child. There's dopamine addictions, there's reduced retention times, there's sleeping disorders. It makes it harder you to focus in schools. We think that those damages are inherited, are well known, and are better than any some online friendship that they are talking about at the side of the house. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you, Deputy Prime Minister, and for the voting. Let's welcome Amitai.
I'll do three things in this speech. The first is tell OG what our actual policy is, not what the ghost that they're debating against is. Then I'm going to explain why this policy with parents is a winning one. First, in terms of why the social relationships that it creates are saving, and also why there are many auxiliary benefits of being able to cultivate specific skills or avoid specific kinds of harms, even if they're not porn, which will be avoided maybe on both sides or won't be on both sides. The kinds of violence that is a more mild form of violence that is experienced in video games that could be controlled for more. And finally, I'll explain in what I think is cool analysis why the parent-child relationship actually improves. I want to start with what is it that we are defending versus the ghost that OG thinks we're defending. OG is like, ha, you have to go and look all the time at what they're browsing. You constantly look at their games and their videos. No, like, did you listen to the LO? So the LO explicitly says, we look once every while at the history. What is the change from the status quo? Maybe they look at browsing history once in a while. We also once in a while look at your app history, who you're subscribed to, which videos you've seen. And we also sometimes want to measure and collaborate with you. We join you in the games that you play or in what you watch, and we ask to have this time together. This is what we're changing, panel. We're not going to ask you to run every game by us, every show by us. We don't implement strict punishments the second that you do something outside our purview. We explain that the policy we're adding is a mild change to the status quo, and that a lot of the harms are coming from what they demand, not from the additional requirements that we're stipulating. They say, just something I want to clarify is, oh well, but you know, like, what if they police against the gays, and then you can't look at the gays online, and then no child will be gay ever? The problem with this is that clearly we have the fiat to say what metrics it is that we care about when we're policing content. You cannot tell us that the measure to which you are policing content is not determined by fiat, because you are determining by fiat how much time you want to cut from them. We are saying the time that we are, the content that we are adding or requiring of you does not extend to the extent that you control for this content, so you can't blame us for controlling for these things, because our fiat never extends to controlling for everything you see, or every subreddit, or every sub-thread. It is for occasionally monitoring the most extreme kinds of harms. If you have more strong ideological leanings, it is outside the purview of this motion of a parent's wish to impose that on their child. Now let's talk about why it is that the nature of a collaboration in this activity and joining your child is something that can only happen on our side. Even though DPM didn't rebut this in terms of CG, let's insulate to explain why this is something that you can't do if you have a more limited amount of time.
Number one, this is because you have to spend time with your child once they're offline. Once they're the overly dopaminized, the sad child that you just took the phone from, that wants another source for the endless scroll, but is also too bored and too energized, and it's too late in the day once they're done with their usual computer time to go outside. And this is when you as a parent have to pacify the child, either by fighting with them about why they can't have their phone or not, or by spending more time with them offline, or taking care of them offline when they otherwise would be in the room, or being bothered by them when they come into the public space. This is a time trade-off that you have to devote in your time of day, so there's much less time for you personally. If you know they spend all their time on the computer, it's easier to carve out an amount of time to say, I don't have to engage with the post-online mad child, I am engaging with them, and the part of day that I'm spending with them is the component of the day that they're spending online. But number two, there's also a problem in building trust with the child to show you the elements of online activity that they're doing. Because if you want to be interested in the game and you say, show me how you play it, show me who you chat with, tell me how to shoot guns, and you play it with them in the public sphere, in the living room, you know that they're going to shut off your PS in a few minutes or in an hour, telling you that the game's hurt you. It means that the child doesn't believe the parent wants to enjoy the video game with them. And to the extent that the parent wants to engage in the activity in a way that makes them happy and joyful, it undermines their ability to justify to the child why they should stop doing it. Which means that it's difficult to both have this reasoning and then respond to constant concerns raised by the child about why you're limiting them from doing more of this. So the only way that parents can truly entrance themselves in what the child is doing is by agreeing with them and collaborating on what they feel is a good game or is a good show to watch together. The next thing is because if you are forcing them to have an amount of online time that they spend with you, many children in their adolescence that would rather be alone or with their friends would rather do their online time alone. But if their only choice is to watch a show with you or watch no show, they'll pick to watch a show with you. Because at least they get to engage in a digital forum that's still stimulating for them, so this time is now part of your everyday life. Why is this the most important impact in the debate? Number one, you now know which games you like better. They say, but you would still want something, and the parent will be mad because you're taking away their GTA. But you know what the child likes now. You know that what they like is the stimulating action, or it's the strategy or economizing of Pyraxis. Which is why when they ask for GTA, you know enough the way that they play and what they enjoy in playing to Google what Pyraxis games have and suggest that and buying them that and more expensive strategy game that you know they'll also enjoy instead of an action game or another form of a company that produces a similar game that you know they will like. This familiarity means that you can always provide substitutes for what OG says you deprive of the child, which will always be amenable to the child. By contrast, they say, oh, the child is not mad at the parent because the parent just limits them. It's a scale, it's not limiting the one thing. But the problem is that you're always limiting a different need. You're limiting their need to talk to their boyfriend when they reach adolescence. And earlier it's about being able to engage with their friends and whatnot, which is why it's many times a limitation that still takes many different forms. The child is still mad at it because it's limiting different needs. The only difference is that on our side of the house you know how to produce a substitute that the child will like and can use, that it's still digital and that is crucial. First of all, one, it means you can wire them into cultivating a skill that you think is better. The economizing example versus violence or shooting, which both has the negative effect of making them think in more violent terms or making them think in more negative language, but could also have a positive upside. The fact that they think in a manner that will help them be more analytical, even if they're spending their entertainment time on it, if they're engaging in such a game. But secondly, as Gabby explains in no response to CG's POI, the critical mass of spending this time with your parent is important for your own relationship, even if it's not the thing that determines the relationship with their friends. The fact that otherwise you are mad at your parent for having taken your phone. It is only the time of day that you're done engaging with the things that you like, and your only associations with them or the obligations they place you is destroyed when you have this excitement with them. For those reasons, Ohad.
Thank you, Amitai. And to open the closing time, Vlad Victor.
היי, אני חייב לרוץ שנייה לשירותים ומישהו אכפת לי, אתה רוצה שאני אכנס בסוף הנאום או שזה בסדר?
אני מעדיף בסוף הנאום, בסדר?
אוקיי, אני אשאר את זה.
Okay, I will start my speech in... Ready, Tom?
Yes.
Cool. I will start my speech in 3, 2, 1. First house, we didn't look outside. Outside we have grass. Our case is gonna be seen. We believe in outside of the house it's much more easier to touch grass. We also will explain why touching grass is really good in connecting with friendships and creating much more organic and soft skills in the longer term. And also we'll explain why only the amount of exposure of long time is going to have irreversible damages. So let's basically take the case of Ohad. Ohad trying to eat the cake and make it perfect. What they are trying to do, you didn't really say that. What they are trying to say, they say, oh, you're gonna meet up with your friends, you're going to play Minecraft together, and they are going to enjoy that pretty well. But the problem with their case, that most of their friends are also brain rotten. Most of the friends are going to enter Minecraft itself that they can't really fully monitor, can actually fucking have a books of Minecraft in the library of Minecraft themselves. Yes, children are very edgy, children are always trying to push the lines. You cannot really control the social, the other children beside you, but what they can do, and it's much more easier, and this is what we are going to bring you, also to conclude the friendship side of the house, explain you why the social skills, why we're gonna have much better social circles, were much really healthier for us, and also why the internet itself is really trashy, and expand on the point of OG. So OG didn't really analyze you the problem of having a long time media coverage in the internet. So let's give you some kind of things that we are going to fill up the game itself. First of all, we just believe that most of the games that they are talking about them are just have some kind of gambling addictions in them. And what do I mean by that? Most of the highly popular games that the cheater will demand them time after time. For example, FIFA, GTA, all the things are itself have gambling things in them. That means pack opening, all things like that, always try to incentivize you and give you the things. Yeah, maybe it will not show you sex on the cover, but it's going to actually make you buy some packs, and it's going to precondition you to gambling. We believe also the color palettes and the things like that will always make you going to be addicted to it. Like for example, like when you are going to a mall, you have some kind of smells. The video games are doing the same things. They're doing the same color palettes. They're using animations for packs and things like that. All these things are also making you addictions for this food. Furthermore, we believe it's actually giving you some kind of dopamine addiction that is very important. You're always trying to go for the click, for the push, and you know what is important? Even of the red side of the house, the companies will actively try to endorse it and actively try to push it because it needs to be something that touching to the children themselves. Because if the child will have some kind of content that will not be interesting to him, he will just throw it on. That means it must be addictive on later. And reason number 4, we just believe the data collection that's going to be in the after side of the house, it's much more problematic. We believe also the entrenchment that social media is trying to do, even you are going to be most Indian person in the world, is really horrible and really shitty for one simple reason. We believe that in order to have some kind of idea, in order to be a smart person, you need to engage in a, how do you say that, a market of ideas in order to be actually much more intelligent and much more smart. We believe that only the entrenchment of ideas, I don't care about anything left or right, is also horrible. Before I continue, white touch grass is also very cool. I will take first house.
Yeah, so the problem is that your OG is like, will reduce it by 30 minutes or an hour, not enough to destroy dopamine addiction. The more sustainable change is making sure your child doesn't begin to get addicted to games that destroy your dopamine or make you more addicted to gambling by knowing them better and wiring them.
No, we need like some kind of fit for the motion. OG tried to limit it to some time that they will have some kind of good benefits for the child. So if the child is sitting 6 hours in the computer, yes, we believe that limiting it to 2 hours, it's some kind of good. But further on, let's explain you how we are going to switch it. So you basically attack us to say how we are going to give this thing. We believe we have 2 mechanisms that are going to introduce the child to fix. Reason number 1, we believe the child has outside activities. Children like to play ball. Children have out-school activities with their friends. They still have meetups and they still can be introduced to new friends. To the one friend who is interested in playing soccer, for example. Now, reason number 2, we believe they still have active role models. You see some kind of movies, you see some kind of players. Most of the children in the status quo still love Cristiano Ronaldo and still love Messi and still want to follow up We also believe this happen, like, for example, in Ali Salou and other people like that. I think you will always have an active role model that you will want to follow. And we believe this is good, very good thing to introduce him to activities like that. Because yes, we cannot really monitor the child all this time. But what we can do in the time, we can actually to send him of some kind of activities that he loves and can actually give him some developmental skill that's much more better. We believe also the social circles will be much more better on outside of the house because, first of all, for three main reasons. Number one, we will have organic social circles. That means I can actually know that like what he wants. Okay. Also, very important skills. We believe also, yes, when you are giving him some kind of mental activities or something or other, you also need to be much more be part of a group. We believe in the internet because you can mute person. You just can block him. It's much more easier on this side of the house to just become like some kind of very susceptible person who doesn't really who just try to filter out every bad thing. On our side of the house, I can engage in those things. When I have disagreement with my friends, I have a coach who will try to monitor me and try to push me to something. I still want to have the connection with the person afterwards. On their side of the house, you just can filter him or just mute him for the moment, and you're not really introducing in the most important thing. That means on our side of the house, you are getting much better soft skills that will help you in the longer term of your life. And it's very important. That means when I'm talking to my boss and I'm getting a first job interview, I can actually be accepted. I can become much a better person in relationship because people are not thinking to me as some kind of alien. People are much more being understandable towards me and much more better towards me. Also, I believe because we are having some kind of other ways to pursue these activities, it's much more easier on our side of the house to be less addicted to dopamine and things like that because we're getting some kind of evidence. Because we prove you, first of all, just better, just yeah.
Thank you, Victor. And closing up just on the side, let's call Dekel.
Okay, Kylan, ready? Okay, 3, 2, 1. So we're going to have one case on my speech, why we get better relationships between the parents and the children, and why it's that important. Our path to victory is in two different ways. A, we think we get the most long-term effects over time. Yeah, we influence children to the better for the majority of their lifetime, or for like a long time. And two, we think there's a big uniqueness of parents, which wasn't spoken enough in this room, and how the positive influence on parents and children can really make a big difference, both in their beginning years and then later over time. So let's talk about the relationship between parents and child. We argue that improving content by reducing screen time, we get a better relationship between kids and parents. A few bits of framing before I begin. A, we think kids watch screens a lot on both sides. We think A, it was conceded on opening, and B, there's just really unique things on social media. Really unique things on screens. Yes, social media is solely on screens today, and they have many apps and things that just do not exist in real life, like memes, GIFs, stuff like that. And two, we think screens are highly integrated in people's lives. You have to study with your laptop, you have to work with your laptops. You cannot not use screens, even in early years and in school, since middle school. Two, second bit of framing, we think parents can have a huge big impact on kids' life. And we think the status, like in the status quo, this might, like there's a problem in status quo, right? Because we think parents have a lot of potential, they can be education role models, they really care about the children, but we think in the status quo and with things happening, social media, screens, etc., this thing is in danger of not happening enough. And that's the problem we want to solve. We think the criteria, yeah, to get the parents to have a huge impact is trust with their children and healthy communication between the parent and the child, and that's what we give in this case. So how will parents reduce children's, how will they influence the children's content, okay? We think the first mechanism is just communicating with the kid and talking with them, yeah? We think no matter how much you try to look on the kid's, I don't know, history, stuff like that, yeah? The kid is probably more technological than you, he has a better intuition for these things, yeah? And I can't get all I want only by like spying on him on the side, as governments, as maybe OG want to tell us. We think as a parent, I want to communicate with my kid and talk to them about the things he uses, yeah? I want to ask him, what do you do on your iPad? What are you looking at? Does this interest you? Yeah, I want to tell him what I like. Hey, I like to look on these kinds of videos. I like to maybe take breaks and stuff like that. I want to speak with him about things. Yeah, and we think I'd probably want to talk with him about bad things he should not do on the internet, right? Don't talk with strangers, don't answer these spam emails, etc., etc. We think on the other side, yeah, on the government side where I try to reduce time, no thank you, yeah, we think we get much more a black box way to this, right? They talked about screen locks, right? My iPad just gets locked. After a few hours, I cannot open it anymore, right? They talk about technical restraints. Yeah, maybe they put their phone in a drawer, I'm not sure. But we think we have a much more black box approach to this thing and much less communication, as I said and as I framed it now. Cool. Second thing, we think there will be joint experiences between their parents and the children about the screens, right? Because when I want to affect and influence my kids' use of the screen and not only limit it, yeah, I would want to go together and maybe download apps on the App Store together, right? Find apps that are suited to his age, right? When he's really young, I might download some games, and when he's maybe older, maybe download educational things. I'd want to do together because I'm motivated to influence them, and I think that's a good way to do, yeah? I think maybe we watch things together, maybe we watch YouTube together, maybe I want to see what he's watching on YouTube, so I sit next to him and watch it, yeah? I don't spy him on the other room, I just sit together and watch these kinds of things. No thank you. Why does the parent know good, and why will the parents influence like to do good and do work? Yeah, we think we're a different mechanism for this. I think just parents have life experience. I think this helps them to manage like the really bad effects of social media and internet, right? I think if I only limit his time, yeah, he can still be influenced by the really, really bad things on the internet, which are like, I don't know, like racist content and violent content, etc., etc. We think while I have life experience, I can still influence him from missing these things and still having better content viewed on things. Yeah, I can even help him open a mail or get into social media, but only like pages that are probably suited for his age or can have a positive influence. Yeah, I want what's good for my child, therefore I'll get ready and maybe read on the internet and read online things that I think that can help him do these things, yeah? And I think a really important thing in this, in 2026, yeah, parents already know how to use social media, right? I think lots of the problems when parents try to change kids' habits and stuff like that in the past were because the parents didn't grow up with these screens. They didn't know what's good and what's bad in the screens. To the limitation of the screen, where I just lock the screen, yeah, and go away. Yeah, I think that's exactly the trade-off as opening government gives us. And second, I think once I talk to this thing with my kid, yeah, I get a better trust, and we get more trust from him. Because I think when I convince my kid that the screen isn't an enemy and you can use it, yeah, and we can use it together, I think the kid will probably more come to talk with me with things and more feel comfortable to tell me about things. Yeah, I think on the other side, when it's banned and when it's forfeited, kids have more incentive to do things without telling their parents, or to try to hide it from the parents, or maybe even get more minutes because he knows how to open the lock and he didn't tell me. Yeah, I think that's when kids get influenced by more bad things on media, and then they get that more bad influences. Yes, I'll take open.
Look, parents can still discuss what happened in social media simply at dinner or on the way to school or do it physically. However, they just consider that the parent comes and is telling me which pages to like and what to follow, which games to play.
Thank you, Shachar. Yeah. OG told us this is a trade-off debate, and this is a trade-off debate. Yeah. Once we get more of the things, we think it's important. Yeah. And as of this trade-off debate, I think talking with the kid on my way to school isn't good enough because he can still hide things from the screen. There's still really weird things on the screen that maybe as a parent I wouldn't know. Yeah. We need this extra delta. This is an important delta because this extra communication just gets me more influence and insight of this thing. Cool. Last bit of analysis here. Why the parent can find things that will also be fun for the child and educational, right? I don't think we'll get really, I don't know, like sucky parents, sorry, really parents that like only want like only schools and courses, etc., because the parent wants to know what's good for the child, because he was a child himself, he knows the children want to have fun. Therefore, he won't only like get educational things, he'll get things that are only fun to create this good connection and importance. Why is this really important? Yeah, two long-term impacts. We think having a good relationship with your parents is really unique and can help you over time. I think kids have like growing up in the world has many dangers and stuff like that, and I think having good influence in parents is really important for the children. We think especially in 2026, when there's more screens and when there's more social media, this thing isn't guaranteed, yeah? Because kids they can ask the internet, and they can ask AI, etc., etc. There's so many reasons not to. We think giving this kid the trust and communication with the parent is really important. The second kind of impact you have to wait, we think it just stands over time, yeah? And that's when OG tell us we're talking about until the age 15. Since you're 15 until you die, or at least when you're 18, there's so much influence on the internet, so much potential. Yeah, we think the kids still need help in these things, and we think creating communication and trust gives you these things even after the age that these bans aren't in effect. For all these reasons, please oppose.
Thank you, Dekel. And to close the government side of the debate, let's go Menachem. Or whoever else.
Am I standing in the right place?
Guys, want to come in frame? Is he in frame?
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Okay.
Top half ignore the comparative and assume this is a debate about staring at a screen or staring at the wall. Granted, we do think staring at a wall would probably be better for most children, but we are the only team to tell you there is an actual positive alternative for something the child should and could and likely will be doing if he's not on his phone, even if it's 3 hours versus 6 hours. Those hours can comparatively be used for something very positive. Two major clashes in this debate. First, will the content actually be good? And second, what can you do otherwise with that time? Firstly, though, a little bit of framing. Let's be clear. The likely manifestation of what is happening in these extra hours is mindless, passive, algorithm-driven scrolling. Why is that likely? Three main reasons. Firstly, it is the most low friction. That is to say, it doesn't require for my friends specifically to have sent messages now. It doesn't require for me to even choose a show or for me to work hard to do anything. It is easy at the end of the day. Secondly, because it is designed for addiction, and therefore, children who spend a lot of time on their phones are likely to get more addicted to it over time. But thirdly, and critically note, this is specifically true after many hours on my phone when my guard is down. That is to say, if, like said, but there are messages in my class WhatsApp group, it is more likely I opened my phone because of a notification like that I can spend the first 20 minutes actually responding, and someone sent something on TikTok, so I then watch that. What is more likely to happen specifically in those later hours is that once I am there anyway, the lowest friction way to continue scrolling because it never ends, not have to choose because there's an algorithm, means the extra hours are the ones most likely to be spent mindlessly scrolling through TikTok. Now, once we've said that, let's be very clear on one more thing to set the comparative for this debate and then get into the clashes. Note, concede in trying to minimize the debate as much as possible, and this is a quote, and the round is even recorded so you can watch this. Amitai tells you the extent of what they are doing is, quote, occasionally monitoring the most extreme harms. That is to say, at best, maybe they prevent some things, which we can prevent just by banning specific words in search. We don't think they gain much more than that. Now, let's get a little bit into closing opposition, tiny bit of external rebuttal, and then I'll get into the two clashes that I mentioned earlier. So, the one thing I need to talk about outside of the major clashes in this debate is CO say, it forces parents to talk to the kids. 3 easy responses to this. Firstly, parents will likely ask anyway just because they are interested, right? Parents tend to like their children. They tend to care about what their children are up to. We think those discussions will happen anyway. Secondly, these are probably better conversations when they are less contentious, right? And it's true. OG already tell you, look, if you don't have to set hard rules, the kid hates you less. But we actually think you also get more positive, productive discussions when you talk to your child in a way that shows interest and not in a way that makes you banning something, because that's not what we're doing. But thirdly, note the absurdity of their case just in a sort of take a step back meta way. 3 hours online isn't enough because we have no topics of conversation. But if we have 3 more hours in the evening when we're all at home and we could have been talking to our child, but instead we let our kid watch things on TikTok mindlessly, then maybe when he walks into the kitchen for a snack, still watching his phone, we'll be able to ask him what he's watching so he can ignore us because he had headphones in. I don't understand why the trade-off of the time is in any way worth it. I also don't understand why these are the only topics of conversation. As such, I don't think the relationship improves at all on CO. The rest of it will be integrated. So, let's firstly talk about whether or not the content will actually be good. So, opening government says no for a couple of technical reasons. They tell you, A, it's technically kind of difficult to find the right filter or whatever it is. B, they tell you it's not so easy to find good content. And C, they tell you some parents are anti-vaxxers. We think all of these are true, but all of these are, A, fairly easy to solve, as we're told, especially in a world where, as OG concedes, more parents are doing this. There are some known types of content, and maybe more. Right, We don't think he has to be an anti-vaxxer. We don't think he has to be crazy. We just think he has to have a job. He has to have less knowledge than the most powerful corporations in the world, and he's unable to do that. What does that mean? It means even in the best case, where OO tells you, oh, but we monitor the worst of the content, what ends up happening is that you clearly flow from one to the other because the algorithm is built in such a way to push you towards more addictive content, right? So you start with something which is addictive enough for the child to be interested, even if the parent thinks, okay, it's probably not that bad. It goes from there, the algorithm says, cool, what can I push to him that is close enough, but a little bit more addictive, probably less educational, because to the extent that those things are at odds, we want the kid to be here more. And then it ends up happening more and more. At that point, the kid is more addicted. The parents do not know because, again, OO concede, only preventing the worst harms. We think it's really unlikely that any of this works. And then CO says, oh, but now parents understand that social media is bad. You know why? Because it happened 10 years ago, and now all the lawsuits are catching up after all the kids have been screwed over to the point that they can't have social interactions. We think parents have no idea how dangerous talking to chatbots is and won't understand how bad AI was until years later. Parents are always going to be behind, not just because technically some are bad, like Oji said, but because fundamentally they don't have the capacity. Yes, close it.
Banning my kid from using his beloved iPad in the middle of breaking his high score pushes him away from sharing and communicating. I don't get why he shares the same
Cool,
address
he's
as-
going to have bedtime at some point anyway. He's not going to want to put it down whether it's 9 o'clock or 11 o'clock or 1 o'clock. At some point you are doing it. Oppositions are just doing it to a more addicted, more angry kid who has less of a connection with his parents. We think that works out a lot worse. But now, let's touch grass, because like we said, no other team recognized there's an actual trade-off. Even OO, ironically, 2 kids who I met when they were high school debaters who chose to spend their time in an after-school debate club actually learning things. Now, why do we think this is a good thing and it is actually the likely comparative? Because, look, Victor already told you all the benefits, why when you touch grass, you can be active, you can learn skills, you can have role models, you are taught by actual coaches, you are taught discipline, you are just healthier, all these things are true. But note also why it's like kids, for all the reasons they told us, actually want social interactions. They want to be in touch with people. We just think that when there's a really easy algorithm that gets you because you're tired anyway, you do that less. When your parents tell you anyway that screen time is over, you are likely to want something to do, and you will enjoy this. It's a bit of a detox, but kids do enjoy after-school clubs. They do enjoy playing sports. They do enjoy going out with each other. So yes, even if the comparative in this debate was staring at a blank wall versus a screen, we've explained to you, for reasons of addiction, why our side is better, but we actually get all the major benefits of doing something better in that time. CG.
Thank you, Menachem. And to close the debate, we'll have to go to Amon.
Please forgive me. Okay, so I'll start with CG. I feel like many of the, I feel like all of this debate has a problem with trade-off because, like, CG tells us, oh, the children will have better development because he actually sees the other person and stuff like that, but it's not nuanced at all to the motion because they still have a lot of time for phones that, as was already stated in this debate, which they never explained why they actually need the extra delta of this time to get more of time to get actual impact from gaining more time offline for the child. Also, like they say themselves, the children like those kinds of activities, meaning they seek it out naturally without parent intervention. So I don't understand why. So they don't get actual social benefits from taking this side of the debate. They didn't analyze why this data is important at all, so I really don't understand how they can weigh this clash above, because it sounds like, okay, they have enough time at school, they have enough time in after-school classes, they have a lot of time with friends, so I don't get why they need the extra time with friends. Also, like they said, that there is less dopamine addiction, but I seriously don't understand why the delta in screen time also matters, because it was never analyzed. all the outside posts, all the Facebook and Meta and Instagram algorithms, they work pretty well, even if you only get 1 hour of reels per day and you wait for it every day, and then you just want to scroll the whole time, the whole one available hour, because you feel like you're being forbidden to do this, and this is like the forbidden fruit, and the child finds it super, super interesting. So they don't even get the dopamine addiction that they want to prove, because the child is like hooked into it, because it's like he doesn't get to experience this, and now he does, so now he wants to spend the whole time doom scrolling and stuff like that. I feel like that OG suffers from similar, so not to OG, I feel like OG suffers from similar problems, because also like, the parents don't have the capacity to do what he does in the available screen time. The kid gets unlimited access to the internet, which they themselves think it's also dangerous. Okay, so on outside, and they also like question the capacity of parents being able to do this on outside. But we think that like there is a lock up as a preventative action of the kid being able to be extra time on an app, there is also like preventative action on which app you download. There is also a preventative action that can help a parent like construct the algorithm of his child YouTube, because he can subscribe, because he can scroll himself, and because he researches what things will make his child happy. He actually explores it and will be able to fit his like the preventative mechanism that OG tries to use exists on our side. So the capacity so the difference in capacity is not clear at the moment. I'll take you in a second. Okay. Also, like, I feel like OG says that different parents have different morals, and it will cause a lot of problems around children. Okay, but OG also says, but the parents have no capacity to constantly check. He has limited time, and he cannot constantly check what the child is doing online. So we agree, okay? They don't have infinite time, which means they're not likely to just decide on their own, oh, this game looks bad, or this game looks good, because they don't have time to actually check each and every single game their child wants to play. So it's rather not all parents check all the games, but rather than